Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Jankyard, the best and only podcast for Ashes Reborn. I don't know what I'm going to call it at this point, but it's the best, the most diverse, the craziest, the wildest, strategic, extendable card game by Plaid Hat Games, and we're here to talk about all things Ashes, in particular, news, events, meta, and deck building. And today, after much waiting, we finally have Killercactus back.
Very happy to be back.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
It has, and thankfully, you know, the world of work for me was crazy, but I was able to still play a bunch of Ashes in that time. It's kind of the only thing I did that wasn't counting things for a long time. But yeah, happy to be back.
Well, and funny enough, so we're not planning this, and we don't have internal strife or anything. But you're back, and Schmendrix is away. He's going on vacation, so he couldn't make tonight's recording. So it will still be some more time before all three of us can chat. But yeah, let's just get into some stuff, because like I said, it's been quite a break and a lot has happened. There's been like 2 or 3 tournaments. There was obviously the Phoenix League pod tournament, in which you were in the finals versus Lark. Mm-hmm. There was, or is, I guess, the webcam tournament. I'm not sure. I didn't participate, but I think it's
Schmendrix
close to wrapping up.
But yeah. It's I think the first round, whatever, I'm not sure how it's structured, but the first round just ended. And I just saw, I follow like the Discord chat.
Right.
And I think Ninja Dance Mat won the first round of that.
Oh, cool.
With Brian B in second place, but I it's not done. I think they like move on to something else. I don't know how it works, but it's just cool that there's a tournament going on for webcam. I like that. Yeah,
hopefully, I don't know if anyone from the Team Covenant server is listening, but if you are, I know that they are ending their webcam leagues, and that is sort of created a big hole for a lot of people who like to play with their cards and sort of talk, not in person, but it's a little more personable. And so Flora is currently hosting the webcam tournament, and from what I've heard, or some whispers, it might become more of a regular thing. So hopefully that will fill sort of the gap for anybody over on that server. And then I think 2 more tournaments have been announced. So No Such Method is hosting a Blitz tournament, which is going to be the first of its kind, which is pretty cool. It's going to be using chess clocks. I don't remember how much time was agreed upon.
I think it's either 12 or 13 minutes. It's one of those 2.
Yeah, which is awesome. I'm excited for that. I'm signed up. And then there just today, Charlotte, she said that AIL is making a comeback, so the Ashes International League, and that typically is a closed format, change your deck between matches type of tournament, and so that's going to be exciting. And then today is officially the last day of AshCon 4. So it's awesome. There's always something going on,
and then
there's
Phoenix
a lot to cover
League in between all of this.
Yeah,
it's still
Phoenix
going.
League just keeps running. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So let's just start with the earliest thing, if you want to talk at all about the Phoenix League pod event, because I mean overall, I thought it was a really great tournament.
When we saw the deck list, or I guess we didn't see the deck list because it was closed, but like when we saw kind of what people were playing through the tournament, like as it was going, I mean, this was a legit tournament. Like, people brought heat to this thing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I mean, it's pods, and there was a little bit of talk on the Discord about, what's more quote unquote competitive, or what's more fair, like pods or Swiss or whatever. And I mean, if you get a couple of death pods, maybe it's easier for some people to get through, but I don't know that it was. I mean, there was one pod that was pretty crazy. I think they had like Carl and Matt in it or something. Or it was like two of the really like good players were in one pod. But I know my pod was still really tough.
Oh yeah.
And it's. I mean, I think the competition was spread out pretty well. There were some. I don't know. I don't want to say newer faces in the top 8, but top 6 it was a top 6, right? Because there were buys.
I think it was top 6, but because what was it? It was you, Lark, Shadow.
Yeah, I think Lark and I got buys.
Lark faced Shadowfire in the semis. I mean, that's how fast things go around here. I can't remember.
Right, I know Lark versus Shadowfire in the semis. I played Apple Sith, and I can't remember who the other two people were that Shadow and Apple Sith beat in the quarters.
Well, for my pod, it was the Cap.
Okay.
I think he faced Apple Sith.
And I don't remember who the other one was. It was. I have to go back and look, but I know that it was it was a really cool top 6 for sure. Apple Sith played an Echo deck, and I was nervous about it with my Herald because of the exhaustion tech in it, and I had quite a bit of like my deck is a swing deck, right? And when you exhaust my guys, I wasn't sure how I would be able to deal with that.
Right. Well, you should say what your deck was, just for anybody not like watching the streams.
Yeah. So I played a Herald. It was 2 colors, Ceremonial and Sympathy. My spell board was Chant of Transfusion, Salamander Monk. So pre Errata Salamander Monk, which is important for this deck, and Mirror Spirit. And then I ran it alongside 3 Old Salt, which I think is a disgustingly sick card for Herald, and a couple Phoenix Attendants and Master of Vampires to get some more stock in there. Blood Chains, Fester, and some Sympathy Pain. I guess I could really pull the deck list up if I want, but that's the main stuff that's in there.
Right. Yeah.
And the whole idea was, this was during like the couple week period before the erratas came out, where Chant of Transfusion and Phoenix Attendant was kind of all the rage, and I didn't feel like dealing with that on the other side. I mean,
that was what everyone was calling packed,
right? And still is.
Yeah.
I was happy to play it on my side, but I was trying to find an answer for it, and I thought Herald was the best answer. Just mark the Phoenix Attendant and kill the thing, and then we don't have to worry about it anymore. So I played that, and I tested the deck quite a bit before the tournament, which is something I don't do often. But I've been trying to get a bit more disciplined in doing that. And I just ran through everything I played. Like I played 3 or 4 test games against solid opponents and solid decks, and it just kind of barreled through everything. So
was this just like on pickup games?
Yeah, like Charlotte and I would play. We still do on Sunday mornings, usually at like 7:00. Both of us are awake, and we'll play. I played her a couple of times, and I played at other times as well, just on Ashteki, but like against players that I know are going to play something that's strong, and
right.
It just like was so. It just felt so strong. So I was like, well, I guess I have to play this in the tournament. And I think my pod had Clue and Nick Conley, and I forget it might have been Aristal. Maybe it might have been the third player. I can't remember now who the third player was, because it's been, like you said, it's been a minute. But it just ran through everything. I think I gave up like 10 blood points or something total across my 3 games. It just seemed to work really well with controlling the battlefield.
Yeah.
Between Old Salt and Mark and Chant of Transfusion and Mirror Spirit, kind of as like I put Mirror Spirit in the deck to be, I wanted a conjuration that I could summon that had at least 2 attack. so that I always had a unit I could just put out to kill a knight with Mark. That was why Mirror Spirit was there.
Did you have it focused?
I did. I had 3 copies.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
But what Mirror Spirit turned out to be instead of that was just like this like game ending swing piece. Because between Salamander Monk and stuff like Old Salt and Vampire and Mark, the deck was just really good at controlling the battlefield and building up an advantage so that I could get to the end of a round where I had, like 4 exhausted units out and then summon a 4-attack Mirror Spirit, and the opponent's battlefield is already dead or exhausted out because Harold's so good at controlling it, and then I could just swing through.
I mean, it's a great deck. It's not like, the spoiler alert for anyone, you lost to Lark in the finals, but it's not like that deck, just because it lost, I mean, it's a great deck, and I think it still holds up post Errata.
Yeah, it does. I haven't messed around with it since, and that's par for the course for me, right? Like I finish an event and I'm on to the next thing, and I want to try to make something new, but I do want to mess with it a little bit to see, what do you put in place of Salamander Monk. Vampire Bat Swarm comes to mind as a potential replacement that's in color.
Yeah, I don't know about that plus Mirror Spirit. That feels a little
it's an extra die, right, per round, at least the first one, and then it kind of depends on
if it lives, then that's fine. It's only 2 dice, but if you have to start, like, I just think in a meta, I said this before or to somebody else who had played in AshCon, I just think you're gonna end up paying like at least 3, maybe 4 dice to try and keep it alive, right? With all the old salts and ping going around.
Yeah, it depends. If it's really good if you can keep one, if you can have one survive a round.
Sure.
And then you get through with a swing or something, and then you pay 1 die to refresh it in the next round. And again, it's great for Harold because it gives him that 2-attack body that can always threaten just a night kill.
Right.
And it's a unit that's like that has it's not as good as Salamander Monk, obviously, having that battlefield presence, but it's a unit that can die and come back and still be there as an attacker. But it's no Salamander Monk because really what Salamander Monk did for that deck was with Mirror, like alongside Mirror Spirit specifically, if you attack with the Monk, and a lot of times they don't want to counter, right? Because they don't want to give you that Monk Spirit that can also attack.
Yep.
But if they don't, then it's just another token on my Mirror Spirit eventually. And if they do, then I get another attacker, and I normally would take the Spirit and find a way to attack something to keep it alive and still give my boost on my Mirror Spirit for later. And it was kind of like a guaranteed body to have on the battlefield that was easy to swing and get exhausted before the Mirror Spirit came down.
Yeah.
But I thought about Fallen, and obviously you can go into a 3rd color, and there's a million conjurations that are good in a 3rd color.
I thought it was cool that you only ran 2, and like so something I'm not great at doing it. It's not like I've built a lot of decks lately, but when you do end up playing a deck that has only 2 colors, it's the consistency and not having to worry too much about meditations is so much better than playing like 4 colors where you're on such a nice edge, especially if you have any power costs. It's so much harder. I mean, obviously you can still get bad luck with rolls or, face a deck that's largely about spin down. But I just think that deck is so smooth the way you made it that adding another color might take away.
Yeah, it might. I was just playing some Rowan today. I've been messing around with a Piercing Light Rowan deck that's 2 colors.
Awesome.
I tried to add a 3rd color because I don't have time in the deck, and I'd like to get Era's End in there because Rowan's awesome with it. I played a game this morning with like a 2-die Time Splash, and it just felt like not the same at all. It was amazing kind of how just a splash of 2 dice and a couple time cards threw off that consistency that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's not just the meditations, it's the hand, like your draws,
Yeah.
right? Like when you only have two colors, you have a lot less chance of drawing into cards that you can't play because you're limited on your dice.
Well, it's why we always talk about how basic syncs, and I say
Right.
we, not like you know, not the Jankyard guys, but just in general in the community, that they're so important for wider spreads.
Yeah. I think they're important in general. I mean, it really does smooth everything out. I mean, even you look at that Herald, I've got 3 Mirror Spirit books, I've got a bunch of Old Salts, I've got Master Vampires. Like, there's a bunch of ways to spend basic dice. Maybe still not even enough, potentially. But it was really hard to draw a hand with that deck where I didn't have at least the option to play everything in it.
Yeah.
Not that you always want to do that, but, like, I had that option in most rounds, in most games.
You got to start doing the hieroglyphic math that Charlotte's doing
Yeah.
to make sure you know exactly what you're going to get.
Yeah, I wish I had the patience to go that in depth into building, but it's a really cool way to build decks.
I think it's a valuable tool that any player should at least try a couple times, whether it's like even just taking, not while you're deck building, but go to like a deck that you've already played a bunch, whether it's a net deck or your own thing, and then just calculate it out and see, like, compare the experience of your playing when you're like, oh man, my hand, like I'm just always struggling, or I never, some games I just have completely dead hands, and then take a look at like, the math. Is it just because you don't have the right dice spread, you're too thin, or
Right.
Whatever.
Definitely something that should be thought about.
So just catching back, because I was scrolling while you were talking, it was Flora. Flora was the other player, and I don't know how I forgot, because it was
yeah.
Flora versus Shadow, and it was a great game too.
Yeah, she played my Jessa. I don't know how I forgot that either.
Yeah, that was a cool matchup too. But yeah, so much, and then like right in the middle of the tournament, the Errata and new OP stuff dropped, and that was just like, we had a couple weeks of this Phoenix Attendant Chant of Transfusion meta where it was very heal based, grindy games with a ton of free ping. And then all of a sudden it seems like everything changed. Now we're in sort of a, like, almost like chaos. Like nothing is settled yet. As far as the decks that I've seen in AshCon and just around, it's just everyone's throwing everything at the wall. It's great.
Yeah, it is. And AshCon's always kind of like a Wild West, it seems. I mean, not only do we get a bunch of different players that we don't normally see in like the regular online tournaments, but AshCon always immediately follows a new release. So people are just trying stuff, right? But really, you're right. Like, this is the first time I can remember in a while where we kind of don't have it figured out. Like the Ashes Bennett never really truly settles, maybe with the exception of right before Corpse of Iros, where we had,
It was like 6 months.
yeah, like the Tristan Rowan meta for a long time. And even pre them, Brennan and Hope kind of settled it. Like, they rose to the top and they kind of stayed there through a long period of time. And that was the longest time for sure without like a big shakeup. Like, Tristan and Rowan were good and they brought new tools, but they didn't really do a whole lot to shake that up. If anything, it just gave Hope Snapper to play with.
Well, yes, Snapper was the big boogeyman, because that enabled Salamander Monk, and then you just saw, which we were calling Value Town. It was just everybody played it because it was the most efficient thing you could do. And then there was still Hope Creepers, because Tuxedo won whatever the tournament was before the Waves Open, I think.
Yep.
And so yeah, it was solidified as much as any meta in the last few years or I guess year and a half that I've been around has been. And it's just really cool now that we're back in sort of that fresh, like, everyone's trying different things to see what pans out. But with AshCon 2, there's obviously new players, which is great. People coming in and like, hey, this is a casual format, cool. Like, you're not expected to bring the craziest, most worked out tuned deck. But there's also a lot of people who, at least as far as I've talked to, play a lot in person.
Yeah.
And so it's not so much that people are trying new things, it's that we're seeing different like local metas from people who are traditionally not on like playing online a lot join. And so it's like a mix of all these different local metas, like things that worked out for them with their friends, and now they're bringing it in. And so that's what I like to see as well, which is really cool.
Yeah, it is. Like my pod specifically had 3 players, 2 of which I've seen around, but I think it's CN Weezard, who is a player from Columbus, so he's actually locally only a couple hours away from me. But I haven't met him in person, and we've been like, there have been a couple like we used to have here in Ohio. There was like up in Cleveland, there was like a local group that would get together, and he and I like did like both went, but not on the same days. And then they had the Plaid Hat tournament in Columbus that I was supposed to go to, and I didn't get to go to. But I think he plays in person some, both in Columbus, and I know that there's like Indianapolis has a fairly active like in-person get-together or tournament scene.
Right. Well, that's also where Gen Con is hosted, right?
It is, correct.
Yeah.
So I know he's played some in person, and he has been around online, and he's a pretty good player. And then I have the Chong Master, who we don't see on the Discord much, but I know I've seen him before, and I think I've seen him in other Ash cons, maybe.
I have, or at least I recognize the name.
Yeah, and then Captain Cup, who was pretty much brand new, but had two online play, but had played in person. And so I played Weezard a couple times, but I don't think I'd played the other 2. And all 3 games were just really solid games. So, it was kind of like you said, people like newer players or players that don't play online a lot, bringing their own kind of spin on what they're playing locally or what they're, what, like you said, what's worked for them, into this. And I don't want to say I was surprised that the games were strong, because I wasn't, but it was cool to have like really solid games of Ashes with players that aren't like, one of the regular 40 that are on our Discord posting every day. So that was really cool. I was excited about those games, and just AshCon in general, because the couple stream games I've watched, I've also included players that, again, aren't one of those 40 players that post on Discord every day. And they've been really cool games, and these are skillful players that aren't just coming with like a base deck that's modified with a couple cards. I mean, these are well thought out things, and they're playing well. So it's exciting for the game for sure.
I know that there was at least one pod, which was, or what appeared to be, sort of perhaps the Asian group of players that, was it Hanabi? Mm-hmm. Like I know he's been, I don't know if it's in China or Singapore or Macau. I think he's sort of doing like East Asian League, and he's also a player that's been responsible for helping with the translation, I believe.
Yeah.
So there's at least one pod there where I saw them playing. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see any of their games because they were locked. But I'm curious as to, like, again, as I was saying, like the local metas, what they've been finding and experimenting with, and how that might differ from what sort of our Ashes Discord echo chamber sometimes falls into. Let's talk then about AshCon and our deck specifically, because what we decided to do this time, which I think is really cool, and I want to immediately do it again, is that you, me, and Schmendrix decided to run almost the exact same deck. We basically started, we all had ideas on decks. We chose one, and then we set a rule where we were allowed to modify like up to, I think I said 3 cards, just so that, if you wanted some small variants, and then we all ran it. That would so that way we had as much data as possible against different matchups with different pilots. So how about you talk about that? Like, you can explain the deck, and your experience with it.
Yeah, sure. So it was a deck that you made, actually, I think, or that you built.
Yeah.
And it was out of Saria, which I really like in this meta. Like, we kind of talked about how the meta has shifted and we're not really sure what it is, but I do think that it's, whatever it is, it's a lot grindier than the meta that we played for 6 months before this.
For sure, yeah.
And Saria kind of excels in that role. High life total, able to play 4 ready spells, which is good. Has a mill backup plan built into her Phoenixborn card, which is very important, I think, in a grindy matchup, especially with 20 life that can kind of tank some burn. And has Seaside Raven, which is a card that allows you to sink 3 basic dice every round, and take out a unit of theirs on the board. And there's a lot of 2 life units running around right now. Even if they only cost 1 die, I mean, 3-eyed owls and ruby cobras and gilders are pains to deal with, and oftentimes will take more than 1 die of investment from you to get rid of. So having Seaside Raven there, able to, you can summon a 3/2 body for 3 dice. I mean, that doesn't seem like the best deal until you realize that you're going to kill a 2 life unit with it as well, and it's 3 basic dice. So it's I think Saria is in a good spot in this meta. So I'm not the biggest fan of playing mill decks or against them, but I think that she is poised, I should say, not posed. She's poised to be in a pretty good spot in this metagame. And the deck ran Seaside Raven and Body Inversion, as well as I'm drawing a blank on what the other conjurations are.
Yeah, it's okay. I got it pulled up. I'll cover.
Go ahead. Why don't you go through it? Because I don't have it. I'm recording on my phone, so I don't have it pulled up here.
Sure. Yeah. So we had Body Inversion, Gilder, Ruby Cobra, Seaside Raven as the books, and then and I'm just going off my list because, again, you might have changed a few things.
I don't think I changed a single card. So
sorry. Actually, I changed cards based off of what I gave you. Beast Tamer, Dreamlock Mage, 3 Enchanted Violinist, Flock Shepherd, 3 Hollows, 2 Old Salts, Shadow Guard, 2 Fadeaways, 2 Amplifies, 2 Nature's Wrath, 3 Return to Soil, 2 Seeds of Aggression, 2 Golden Veil, and a Sympathy Pain. And I think in your version, there's Remorse.
Yeah, I had a couple Remorse in mine.
But yeah, that's the list, at least my list.
And I think Schmendrick's cut the Shadow Guard for maybe another Sympathy Pain or something. And I remember him saying he didn't have the Shadow Guard in his list. But I liked it there just as a potential counter to a Realm Walker deck.
Yeah, that's mainly why it's there.
Yeah, and I like that because I think these Realm Walker decks, there were more and more of them. Clue was playing, he kind of popularized them over the last month of the old meta, and I've seen quite a bit of them out of like Echoes and stuff. So I like to have that in there just as something that's not expected. Like, I don't think someone's going to necessarily root armor a Realm Walker when they see Saria sitting across the field from them. Like, Saria doesn't come with a lot of ping usually.
Yeah.
I think Shadow Guard's probably a pretty darn good counter, so I left it in there.
I got hit from Matt Bowers too many times playing against decks where he would pop a Shadow Guard or 2, and it is a card you don't expect, like, I would say 95% of the time. Even if you see the dice, even if it was a mono illusion deck, sometimes you just forget about the card.
Yeah.
And it really does solve the Realm Walker problem. It's nice against Frostback Bear, just because you're playing Gilder and Ruby Cobra. So if you don't have 2 attack, it's a great, pop it once and trade.
Right.
And Blood Archer is pretty popular right now. And again, like, if they sort of ping and then swing, you got an option. So there's a lot of good uses. I didn't bring it up to 2 or 3. I think I did in the original deck that I created before AshCon, but I dropped it down to 1 just because I thought that that's where it sat nicely with 3 illusion dice.
Yeah, I kind of like 1 in the deck. And here's another kind of thing about just having 1 Shadow Guard, and this is something nobody ever talks about, but is a very interesting thought in deck building, right? Is when you only have 1 Shadow Guard in the list, when it's in your hand, like you said, it's a card nobody expects. But if you have 2 or 3 in your deck and you meditate 1, right, now it's sitting in the discard pile and the opponent has seen it.
Yeah.
So now they're thinking about it, right? Like they might think twice when they go to attack with that bear or that Realm Walker because they've seen a Shadow Guard in your discard pile. But if you only have 1, then they can't see it. Like, if it's in your hand,
right, yeah.
They have no idea it's coming. Yeah, and I was just going to say, with a card like Shadow Guard, I think that's kind of really important because, like, the whole point of it is that surprise factor.
For sure.
And it loses a little bit of its luster when the opponent kind of thinks it's coming or knows it's coming.
And here's the thing. It doesn't have to counter, right? Like,
right.
They swing, you drop it down, and then you're like, okay, well, now I'm going to either hit you back for 3, or I'm going to now swing at whatever you came at me with and force you to either guard, or I take it for free, and then you have to spend other resources like ping or whatever to get rid of it.
Right.
So it's nice that way, that it gives an extra little bit of race, an extra little bit of damage. But I mean, ultimately, so I don't know who it was. I think it was Schmendrix. And this was like when Pact first started. There started to be whispers like, is this the time for body inversion? Because really, that's like a big crux of this deck, is like, or the idea when I put it together. It works so well against Phoenix Attendant. Like, Gilder body inversion just destroys it. And it immediately eliminates the problem with virtually nothing they can do. Worst case, you trade a Golden Veil for body inversion, and it's like, okay, whatever. And then Old Salt is the other, big one that's almost ubiquitous at this point. And Inversion Raven or Inversion Gilder, again, depending on like at what phase, if it's this turn or if it's a subsequent turn, you have free removal. Frostback Bear is making a big comeback due to the bypass that is needed against some of the mill wall decks is huge. And then between Raven and Inversion, you're also dealing with the new Three-Eyed Owl, like the Errata Three-Eyed Owl, which I was running into a few times. I'm like, man, this is a pain.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes care of that. And then, worst case, sometimes... Sorry, it gets clogged a little bit, but in this case with Gilders and Cobras, like worst case, you flip one of your own and clear up a spot, and it's fine. But it deals with so many problems in the current meta, and that's why I was like, I think this is going to be the deck.
Yeah, body inversion has never been better than it is right now. And it's always been good, and it's always a card that's kind of slept on.
Yeah,
but it's always been good. And even like, I would even argue that like we could go back to the days of old Three-Eyed Owl pre-chain, and body inversion is better now than it was then. And it was really good then, it was the only counter to Three-Eyed Owl that didn't trade down with it back then.
Right, yeah.
And I think it's better now because there's just so much stuff between like all that stuff you just listed, which are all things that body inversion can deal with, particularly alongside Seaside Raven, but also with Gilder. And then you put Blood Puppets on top of that, which, those things have made a big comeback too.
Yep, for sure.
With all of the Corpse of Vyros things. And body inversion's phenomenal for that. It deals with so much stuff. And then, Ruby Cobra is another card I don't think you mentioned, but there's a lot of Cobras running around, again, because the meta has slowed down. It's kind of got to this grindy place where Mill seems like a really good option, so I've seen a lot of Ruby Cobras. and its body inversion's great. Like I've thought about, we only run one inversion in this list, and I've thought about bumping it up to 3. Like there's times where I could see myself like wanting more than one body inversion in a round.
Yeah, it came up in one of my matches against I don't know how was TZO.
Yeah.
He ran a Xander mill with doves, and I don't remember, but it was just like, man, the number of units that I could flip if I had 3 of to just really clear things up for free on side actions and then swing would have been a huge deal. But I mean, I'd be interested if you modify it and give it a go. I'd be interested to hear your feedback. I do like where it is now. At least both of us had success. We went 3-0 in our pods. Both of us. Schmendrix, he had someone in his pod drop, and he went 1-1, but the one loss was super close.
And it was to Noah, which shuts off the Seaside Raven, which can be an issue and is something that we might want to, and we've already kind of talked about building in answers specific to Noah to maybe unexhaust the Raven book and get that back against him.
Yeah.
Something that we haven't really, like, that Noah is another thing, right? Where, I mean, obviously Lark just won a big tournament with Noah, but Noah is a Phoenixborn that, like, it was always a threat, but you didn't really have to build around. But now I think you do. Like, Noah is going to be there. And
oh, for sure.
You got to have a plan to deal with him shutting off your best book in round 1 and maybe further.
The whole thing about, testing as a group, which I know is done in other games, is, when the 3 of us, let's just say, right, the previous Waves Open or whatever, we all ran different decks, and unless you really do have the time and dedication to play a lot of testing games, and even then, like, you have to make sure that those testing games are hopefully against things that are going to be representative of what's in the tournament, and that people are attempting to play at a high level and just pick up games. This gave us the opportunity of having 3 people run the deck, so you're getting 3 different pilots and seeing how it sort of fluctuates with their playstyle, and then also just more games in effectively the same type of tournament setting to see how it pans out, hopefully against a wider variety of decks. And I think that this is I don't know if you want to call it a tool or a process. This is something that is underdone by the community members, and it's definitely piqued my interest to do it more, because I think we just get in, like, as soon as Schmendrix played the Noah match, we're like, oh, we really should have slotted a generosity for just a first 5 tech
or a Gates or something.
Or Gate. Yeah. So the other, I just want to quickly go back to the other piece of the deck, or I guess a couple of pieces that is really important and is just as a broad meta thing right now, is removal from game effects. So Fade Away and Return to Soil. Those were like immediate sort of like core pieces that I wanted to include, because the 3 of us were talking. It's like, man, there's so much recursion. Like, ceremonial is everywhere, so everyone's pulling things back. With Phoenix Attendant, it basically makes it free. And then I know you have dropped, I don't know how many decks, where you're just running 3 Shepherd of Lost Souls, which is crazy. So removing things from games, particularly the problematic allies, is such a big deal. And those 5 cards, the 2 Fadeaways and 3 Return Soil, were massive in my games. I think they were basically the reason I won most of them, because I shut out all the recursion of the problematic allies.
Yeah, and in these, my 3 games, I think all 3 went to fatigue. And specifically, in at least 2 of the 3 games, I fell behind early, which I think Saria can do, with her 4 battlefield. And I mean, Raven can get good trades sometimes, but sometimes it just can't, and she can kind of fall behind a little bit. But what the deck does really well is when she does fall behind, it can pivot to the mill win con really easily and just kind of hold the battle, like hold the line basically. And that's kind of what I did in at least 2 of the 3 games. I know all 3 went to fatigue, but a couple times, I think at least in 2 of them, I was against Phoenix Attendant. And, Phoenix Attendant, Chant of Transfusion can kind of wreak havoc on a mill win con if they have a good way to trigger the chants themselves. They kind of erase the fatigue damage. And being like the deck having multiple options to remove those things from the game is extremely important. And I removed a bunch of Phoenix Attendants from discard piles in my game. So I would agree. I think it was extremely important to have that remove from game option there. Not only is Ceremonial everywhere forcing or giving players the ability to recur cards, but there's just more allies in general right now, because Ceremonial is the ally color, and therefore more people are playing allies, and there's more allies to pull back. So, the flip side of that is there's also more allies to remove from the game. That's why Shepherd of Lost Souls is seeing a lot of play, because there's just more good allies now to pull back with that card. So, yeah, I 100% agree. The Return to Soil, and, I guess also Ritualist and Chants are a big deal too, and Ritualist can pull Chants out of the discard pile. Fadeaway doesn't deal with that, but Return to Soil does. So that card specifically, I think, has jumped way up in usefulness and power right now in this meta, and Saria is like the perfect place for it.
So my matches I think they all went to fatigue as well. Like I said, Tizzo, he ran a Xander Doves mill deck, like a mill wall, and just the chip mill that Saria can put out with Heart's Pull, which gave me more options, and then Cobra. As soon as I was able to, I think I milled off maybe one, I think it was just one Dove book. But as soon as I milled it off and I was able to drop a Return Soil on one of the other Doves, I just got rid of the third book.
Yep.
And then...
Yeah, prevent the Essence Druid pulling it back. That's big, too.
Yeah, and I got rid of the Essence Druids. And then in another match, it was like all heal. It was Living Dolls and... was it Drain Vitality and Phoenix Attendants? And so those were great, just flipping them, getting rid of things. But then the last match was a real grind, which I wasn't necessarily anticipating. And it was Brennan, as I like to refer it, Bouncy Castle. And it was 3 Shepherds, 3 Hollows with the Change of Heart.
Yeah.
And it was so irritating. I think there was Ritualist in there too. And the only way that I eventually managed to stop it, and I was down to like 0 deck, was that I was ultimately able to fade away and Return Soil the Shepherds and the Hollows so that there just nothing could come back.
Yeah.
But it was so annoying to deal with. And it was a long, grueling game. Man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get the damage through. It was crazy.
Yeah, dude, Hollow is a heck of a card. Again, another card that kind of thrives in this grindier metagame.
Mm-hmm.
And is a card that, so like, I go back to that Herald that I played in the pod tournament. And one of the things I've thought about is kind of pivoting that more to a mill plan B instead of a kind of a soft burn plan B, which is what I had before with like Fire Archer and Sympathy Pain. But just because the game is grindier now, and Hollow is a card I like want 3 of in there immediately. It's so good. Like that main, it's the main action spin down specifically.
Yeah,
it's really strong. It's in 2 dice, right? And you get a 2/1 body. It's a really good card. it's probably not played a lot, but like you look at Matt Bowers, he's been playing Hollows like his whole life. And like there's a reason why he's really good. He knows some of these cards are good. He's also played Saria his whole life.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, I think, and this is a deck that has a lot of the things that he's done in Saria previously. And Hollow's one of those on our side too. But yeah, man, that I've played against, or at least I don't know if I've played against that Brennan deck, but I've seen it, or at least a version of it. And yeah, all that spin down it generates is nasty.
It's not just the spin down though; it's the spin down and the ping.
Yeah,
right. Mm-hmm. And it's oh god, and it can happen. I mean, there's only so many if you're playing in nature, so many ice traps you can have, because then they just shepherd the things back and just keep going. And so it's like, wow, crazy. But I guess, so what else then? We've sort of talked like, here and there about what we played and what we were anticipating the meta to be. It seems like both of us ran into more like grindy mill heal decks. What else have you seen around? Like, have you watched the streams for AshCon, or have you just been jumping in games?
Yeah, I've seen, so one of the decks I played in AshCon was a Tristan Fish deck, with Vampire Bat Swarm and Raptor Herder, and a lot of like, it was a very swing wide deck, right? And Tristan's another Phoenixborn that I think is positioned really well right now. I know Asterix has been playing a bunch of Tristan.
Yeah, a ton.
And and it's a deck that Brian B made. And it's very similar to the one he built kind of right after Tristan dropped, with Prism Tetra, Ruby Cobra, Gilder, and Ryle the Meek.
Was that was Brian? Because I know Carl was also playing that. Well, I mean, those two, they talk all the time about deck ideas. So
Brian was the first person I saw with it, but who knows? It could have been either of them.
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter who like created it. It was just, I've seen it before.
Yeah, but like that deck can mill you really quickly with magnified Ruby Cobra, and a sprinkling of other mill cards in the deck. It can mill you out really fast, and it's kind of like the definition of a swing mill, right? Like even more so than the Saria deck that reran, which can swing a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
But is more focused on control and mill. This Tristan can do the control and mill thing, and it can just, swing fish at you for 6 and swing Ruby Cobras and stuff like magnified Cobras are hitting for 2, and it has Raptor Herder, and it can do a lot of that stuff too. And the removal it gets with Ryle the Meek and Tsunami Shot is just a lot of pressure. And I do think that deck is very well positioned in this meta, but I've seen just a ton of stuff. Everybody seems to be trying out a variation of Lark's deck.
Oh God, every
everybody
other game. I jump in and I'm watching someone play Mono Illusion, or I played. It was KIP, K-I-P.
Yeah.
First game after your finals, it was an Auric version of Lark's deck, and I was like, oh God, and it was brutal. Mm-hmm. It was so hard to play against.
Yeah, it's not fun to sit down on the other side of all that purple. But it's exciting that people are trying that out when, especially, Illusion was looked at as kind of the worst color for a long time. And it's certainly not now. And again, a grindier metagame is a good spot for all this spin down to finally work well. And it's just kind of interesting how strong the solo Illusion can be. And players are finally getting to see just how good that dice power is. Yeah. When it was kind of thought of as one of the worst dice powers before. But, it mills you and it keeps you off of reactions at the same time.
Well, I feel like I talked about that like a few episodes ago, or maybe it's just been like a month or two. But I feel like one of the things that became critical with all these, especially against burn decks or whatever, is just we always talk about splashing like frog die for ping or splashing a ceremonial for recursion or whatever, splashing a single illusion even just to make sure that you can turn down reactions like Golden Veil that potentially will end your game plan is so important. And then yeah, sure, it adds the mill effect too if you want to go in that direction.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's good enough, right? Just to shut off Golden Veil. Like I've played Odette decks and stuff where or in Xander's specifically actually, where I added illusion for no reason, right? Other than I wanted to spin down Golden Veil and Fate Reflection.
Yeah.
Like that's why the die was in there. I mean, I played my own Fate Reflection or something, so I had a use for it if I didn't need to spin down something. But that was why it was there. But, I think where the power is truly seen, and I mean, so again, that's good enough in itself. If you're going to turn down those cards and get use out of yours, that's probably good enough. And I've seen Illusion Dice Power win games just by like spinning down Sympathy Pain before you swing and stuff like that. But it's the true power is shown where you're spinning down, you're avoiding reactions and milling your opponent at the same time with one dice power.
Yeah.
And that's what Lark's deck did so well, I thought.
It was not just that though. Like the trick of his deck was that when he used the dice power, he also had reimagine, so it basically made that spin down free.
Yeah, it just added, it's like, I look at it as you're taking up a spellboard slot to add a secondary spin down effect to your reaction spell. But however you look at it, you're right. Like he's, not only is he now, messing with your reactions and milling you, but he's doing that at the same time as playing his own reaction spells, which are now, by the way, protected from your spin down. And that's important, right? That's something that I don't think should go unnoticed about Reimagine. In a meta right now where everybody is kind of spinning down stuff, you put that illusion die on Reimagine and they can't spin it down. Like your Fate Reflection is going off if you have a die on Reimagine, right?
Oh yeah, it's huge. It's a really important interaction.
Right. And Illusion just has so many good reaction spells. And you combine that with Noah's Shadowblade being maybe the best reaction spell that Ashes has. And it was just kind of a perfect storm type deck that a lot of things just weren't prepared to deal with. I wasn't prepared to deal with it by any means. And it was kind of it's kind of a like a perfect anti-matchup for the Herald I was playing, because I couldn't stock things like Shadowhounds. I couldn't deal with that. I couldn't remove them. And it was really rough for me to play against, but I think it was rough for a lot of people to play against, and that's why I did so well. But
oh yeah,
just just the novelty, I think, of somebody winning with a mono-color deck has inspired a lot of other players to try out, that variation. So I've seen a lot of that on Ashteki and a lot of different Phoenixborn shells, not just Noah. Like you said, Auric. I've seen Cole. I've seen Ninja. Somebody just played one against me today. I think it was Ninja Dance Mat. And I can't remember what Phoenixborn it was now. I just played him like a couple hours ago. But yeah, it's been in a bunch of different things, with or without Reimagine and that stuff. But just a bunch of illusion dice and stuff like Keepsake that takes advantage of that spin down.
Yeah, I know Ninja was playing mono illusion. I saw him in a game today. It wasn't against you; it was against someone else. But I know he's been playing that. And then, but even before that, when Corpse of Heroes came out, Brian was talking about how like he had been messing with mono ceremonial and a bunch of different shells, including James for like Fallen and stuff. And And so I'm just, like, I'm excited for how overall Red Rains and the mono decks are going to solidify, hopefully, the strength of being in a single color, but even just like making a single color or dual color more viable. And I think there's already, for sure one out there. Like you and I were talking after a game, I think with Shadowfire, like there's definitely a mono time deck
Yep.
to be built. That's for sure out there. I know for a fact that Shadow has a mono charm deck that just wrecked me. I don't remember what I was playing, but it was just super irritating with swallows in Leo and Mill, and it was just like, this is I think I conceded halfway through the game. It was just like, well, no, I can't do anything.
Yeah, I can see that being extremely annoying. I think there's good decks for every color. I think I have a mono deck of every color on Ashes.live, but it was like pre-Corpse of Vyros and pre-Errata.
Right.
And I think really, like, I think the Erratas themselves have, and obviously Lark's deck was before Errata, but just like by bringing Brennan and Hope kind of down to the, like, a fair level. I don't want to say fair, because I don't like saying anything was broken before, but they were really strong, and like kind of bringing them into check with the rest of the field opens the door for some of these other strategies. Because before, if you wanted to play, like a monocolor deck, if you were to run into one of those kind of, big bads of the meta, you didn't have enough options in your deck to deal with it. Like you couldn't, because you're in one color, you just couldn't build in the necessary answers that you needed to deal with those super powerful decks. Now that those are gone, I think there is more opportunity to dabble in one or two colors and still have enough breadth in your list to deal with a lot of the meta. And that's only, like you said, only going to get stronger as Corpse introduces 9 new cards for every color. Or Red Rains, not Corpse, Red Rains.
Right, yeah, Red Rains.
Introduces 9 new cards for every color.
You may not want to say, I'm going to say it. I do think that, and I've stated it multiple times, but I think that Hope and Brennan were broken. Whether you want to call it overtuned, extra efficient, I don't care what version of the phrasing you want to use. In my opinion, there was an imbalance that had been showcased over and over and over again from a mathematical efficiency perspective, and there wasn't any real viable option. Like, as fast as you could make anything else that just made, like, anything you could either print or any deck that you could come up with, it was just better in Hope or Brennan because of the efficiency. And the erratas that came out, are just great. Moving Spirit Burn to a main action is so impactful. It's like, I'm glad with like the health change and everything else, but it's such a big deal in terms of the pacing and also changing it to an ally only. Brennan, when I've played more Brennan, because there is more variety to try, and It's just so much more satisfying to play Burn that way and to face Burn that way. It's still very strong. I lost last night against someone playing effectively, JK Brennan Burn, but with the new Brennan, and it's still very strong. You still have to, tech for it or build against it or prepare for it. But it's not the crazy, like, here's, 7 to 9 damage in, 1 to 2 turns. Hope Creepers, I've only heard that Carl is still, well, he's still doing Creepers. He's doing it in, I think, Koji, but I've heard that he's still having a lot of success with it now that it's down to 1 conjuration count. But again, that's just like, it was an elegant tweak. And when you slow down, we're currently in like a maybe very slow or currently testing slower waters where games are going, to 6 rounds or whatever. But I think in general, like, when it was sub when it was 2 rounds to 3 rounds, it was too fast that all the other ideas that exist out there, all the other Phoenixborns and deck types that were out there, and even the cards, they weren't being played because they couldn't compete at the speed. Now, because they're all in the same area, or there's at least room for them to be viable, you have so much more variety. And I think for any game, that's just more health. Like it's a healthier place to be.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, you have Phoenixborn like Auric and Rowan that really struggle when the game's only going to go 2 or 3 rounds. Like, I mean, their win cons are based on stretching the game out, and when the game's not going long, like those, they stay in the binder. I mean, obviously Carl had some Rowan success and was able to find ways to stretch games out, but still, that deck that he had struggled against Hope and Brennan. And now, like, you know, I played that 39 life Auric or whatever people are calling it because I healed all that damage in the one game. Yeah. And like that deck would never have been possible in a world where I'm going to lose in 2 rounds to Brennan Burn.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, now you can do cool stuff like that. And it opens up, I mean, it opens up some jank to like actually compete.
Well, have you seen Waves playing Dreadwraith?
I have.
Yeah, it's amazing. And he won like 2 or 3 games, at least the ones that only caught the ending of it, but it was just like, that's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, Dreadwraith got a lot of help with Corpse of Iros for sure.
Sure.
Just the fact that those overtuned decks are gone allows a card like Dreadwraith to, you know, it's still bad, but like it's not so far under the power curve because the power curve has been brought down a bit. So yeah, it's just, you know, the difference between wherever Dreadwraith sits, you know, on the power curve and the top of it is now smaller. And it allows for, you know, some new synergies to be found. And again, you don't need to build in all these answers. Like, I don't need to put an Arazend in my deck just to counter a Hope Creeper in the first round, you know, and stuff like that. So I can build with different options now and put in some synergies, some new stuff from Corpse of Iros. I can start infuriating Dreadwraiths and using Serve the City and stuff like that with them. And I'm not going to get punished horribly against like the top meta matchup. That's the best thing I think about the meta. I don't like playing against Mill, and I've been vocal about it and that's just about in every card game. It's not just Ashes. I find like slow controlled games where the best option is not to do anything unfun. And I think there's going to be more of those types of games in this meta than there was before.
Maybe. I think there's going to be a natural bounce back, and we're already seeing that with Frostback Bear being more prominent in a lot of decks.
Yeah.
And people doing other forms of bypass, whether that's Realmwalker obviously is like a good option for that, but just in general, there's going to be the natural tendency of like these wall decks to prove some success, and then other people being like, oh, but now that also lets me like go for Archie Smash or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's answers. Like I'm bad at like emotionally snap responding to something. Like I'll get into a couple like bad games of Ashes in a row where the best play is to sit there and not do anything. Then I get mad and start posting on the Discord about how I hate playing against Mill. But then like 2 days later, I realized, yeah, there's answers out there, right? Like go play Frostback Bear, or go pick up like the Kyla / Ninja Dance Mat Odette deck and play that, or play Mayoni and put Hypnotize in your deck. Like there's ways around it.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's finding those should be the challenge, right? And what makes deck building fun. But I do think we're just in a grindier meta now. And we probably needed to be, because I don't know that it was healthy to have Brennan winning top of round 3 or earlier every game.
No, and definitely not for like, you know, I obviously, I think a lot of us want like a healthy, exciting, strong, competitive sort of game, and we don't want to feel at any point that things are being watered down or whatever. But at the same time, like, I would say if you polled the community members, you know, at least 9 out of 10, you're going to get, I would prefer that we just have like more community members. And to get more people into the game, you know, one of those things is you can't scare them off, like new people who are like, hey, let me try this game. And then you're like, oh, I stomped you in 2 rounds. And
Yeah.
you basically didn't get to play your deck, or any of the cool ideas that you see or you think of are basically invalidated because the math doesn't work against these hyper efficient decks.
Right.
And that's just not fun for anyone. And I think that the current state is in flux, but a little bit slower is much better overall.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I just, there's days where I just don't want to play a game of Ashes where I'm just going to sit there.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't want to play that way, then there are decks out there that will force the issue, right? Like, I can go play Tristan Fish or something where, like, I'm going to attack, and that's how I'm going to win. Or play bypass, or, play some kind of burn variant. Like, I think there's a lot of Jessa decks out there right now that can be made that are pretty darn efficient burn, and Brennan is still an option to burn people.
Right. So let's talk about that then. Like, what are the next, if we're talking about like bounce back or alternatives, where do you see the next either big thing, like big archetype, or what are the next Phoenix Borns to sort of rise up and address that issue, or cards specifically that are like, oh, this card that wasn't maybe as important now is actually really important for, overcoming whatever you want to call the current meta, which again, we've sort of said is a huge mess, but at least we know that it's slower.
Yeah, I mean, we already talked about the remove from game stuff. I do think Return to Soil, specifically that one, Fade Away is good and is better than it was. But I do think Return to Soil is, like, excellent right now.
Okay.
I think that Maoni, I just Maoni, right? Like, I don't even know her deck kind of builds itself, like, at least 2/3 of it.
Right. Yeah.
But she's really good, right? I mean, Maoni's always been good. I don't think there's been a meta where Maoni's been bad. But when you get into these slower, grindier games, you get into more like unit trading stuff, and that makes Silver Snake amazing because it gets big really fast, and you can include the bypass in there with just all it takes is a hypnotize, and Silver Snake swings one time and wins the game. I think Silver Snake's in a really good spot. I think that Tristan probably is stronger than he's previously been. And I think Tristan's kind of like on the verge of winning a big event. He just needs the right pilot and the right matchup set.
Right, yeah.
And then he's gonna win a tournament. And then there's always Herald, right? So like whenever Maoni's good, Herald is good. Because Herald's the natural counter to Maoni.
Well, I mean, in general, though, Herald I just think is good right now because of all the allies out there.
Yeah, and whenever, again, when the meta slows down, and you get into those, like Herald wins all the unit trading games.
Yeah, and if it's allies, then eventually those run out.
Right. So I do think, like, I could see a world where, everybody remembers that Brian versus Inquisitor 3-hour game of Herald versus Herald, and like that could happen again. Like we're in a meta where like two decks like that can run into each other and kind of do that again. But I do think that deck building nowadays is kind of more, there's more like direct plan Bs And I'm not saying those decks didn't have a plan B. They did, but like the plan B was like Magic Siphon and old Three-Eyed Owl, and that was like the slowest way to mill your opponent out ever.
I wasn't around for those days. Like I got to the point where Three-Eyed Owl was everywhere and whatever it was, Shuffle Bus 4 or 5, but I didn't. It wasn't never the mix of the two, and that would be awful.
Yeah, but like new Three-Eyed Owl will mill you faster than old one.
It's great though because it works as a defender too, and it still doesn't lose its effect.
Yeah, I think Three-Eyed Owl is better now than it was before. It got buffed. It did. And there's probably a Herald deck out there that needs built, that like a Herald Mill. I was just talking about earlier, like a Herald Mill variant that has owls and hollows and stuff like that, and it's trying to mill you out and just not lose the battlefield. I'm scared of a deck like that because I don't want to play against it. I think that deck is something that could do really well right now. Just a Herald deck that kills all of your guys and slowly mills you with owls and spin down.
Okay, so here are my thoughts. So, I'm gonna work backwards from what you said, because I think Herald is in a really good spot. It's in a good spot against Phoenix Attendant and Old Salt. Being able to double up pings or trade one die into two is really good, and having the heal. I'm curious if we take our Ashcon deck and just flip it into Herald. I basically only have to cut 2 cards to fit in 3 Consume Souls, right? Because you're switching out the Raven, and then you just keep the 3 book.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard to lose Raven in that deck.
Well, no, but I'm just saying I'd be interested, right? Because what you lose in Raven, you gain in doubling up the effectiveness of all the other units. So I'd just be curious to see where that goes.
And I said this earlier, but I want to say it again because it's important. Old Salt is ridiculous in Herald. It's ridiculous. It's like the Herald card. It has 2 attack. So, I've always thought Herald wants 2 things, right? He wants a 2 attack unit that can kill a knight, and he wants ping that can double with Mark. And Old Salt is both of those things. They're ridiculous in Herald. Anyway,
Herald is good. Mayoni, I'm on the fence. Mayoni's sort of always been good, but not a lot of people play her, and I'm not sure in the current meta how well she'll work out. But I mean, it's not like she's going to be ever bad. It's just I don't know that her position has at all really elevated. Although I am curious whether a Three-Eyed Owl Mayoni is now perhaps something, right? Because you want to do the sit back and just build up the snake, and at the same time, Three-Eyed Owl now gives you pressure on the hand so that the opponent has to start doing something. So I think that could be really interesting to maybe theory craft. You and I could throw some decks together. I think that Rin, Shadowfire's playing Rin in Ashcon right now, and has had quite a bit of success. The game I watched last night was awesome, but in general, I think Rin just does well because the ice buff is making up for the difficulty in the math of pings going around everywhere, whether that's Chant of Transfusion or whether it's Old Salts, whatever it is. A free ability to move a unit into the next bracket of health is really good.
Yeah, and I think he got buffed up with Corpse of Iros was a big Rin buff because
for sure.
he can have more wounds on his units than everybody else can.
Yeah, Blood Brawl is a great card for him.
Right.
And Shadowfire showed that off last night. He just had a bonkers.
Yeah, he had a 4 damage Blood Brawl or something.
Yeah, it was so good. So that's awesome. And then what what was it? So I'm curious. Like, here's my because we are called the Jankyard after all.
Mm-hmm.
You built the deck that has now just it's like seeped into my head. Specifically the one card which is Memorialize.
Yeah.
And we're talking about how recursion of allies is such a thing. And the only way to match that is with recursion of removal. Or conversely, if you're facing a mill deck, the only way to keep up with it is to make sure that you don't run out of deck. And so you built, originally was in Remia. I think you called it anti-mill Remia or something like that.
Yeah, it was like invincible to mill, question mark.
Yeah, invincible to mill. I thought it would be better in Rowan. And
you're right.
I need to try it a few more times, but in general, just that card in and of itself, to me now it's like the idea. I gotta try this with something else. So that's my jank card, and then Tristan, I think for sure is due, but then Auric and Rowan, if the games continue to be long, they have the natural built-in end game, and so I do suspect that we'll see those Phoenixborn as well, which is really cool.
Yeah, that Auric pack deck, I played 6 or 7 games, and I think I've only lost once. It's legit. Any deck that can heal that much damage off of its Phoenixborn at the same time as pinging the crap out of the opponent's board is kind of scary. And
that's the Drain Vitality one, right?
Yeah, it runs Butterfly Monk and Transfusion Attendant and Drain Vitality, and Reclaim Soul and maybe Generosity too. The whole point of the deck is just don't die.
So gross.
It doesn't really attack. It just sits back and doesn't die until Auric wakes up, and then he kills you. And it's been good. I haven't played it in a while now, but it's been good. And that Memorialized deck was one of those days where I had like the snap emotional reaction to mill, and I was mad, and I think I was complaining to you guys like in the DMs about it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I'm just going to build a deck that can't get milled.
Well, that you can't, like, because you hit fatigue in one of your games, and you're just like, it didn't matter because I can heal more than I'm fatigued.
Well, yeah, the Auric deck didn't matter because I could just heal more than the fatigue damage. But like the Rimia Memorialized deck,
oh yeah,
also doesn't matter because I'll just Memorialize back Revival Pact and play it, and then I'll draw those cards the next round. But And that wasn't even my idea. I think that was No Such Method who built like the bottomless Cole deck way back in the day using Memorialize and Revival Pack so that Cole could just keep drawing and slashing stuff.
That's fun, yeah.
But it makes sense here because I think there's going to be a lot of mill in the meta, and those two cards, like those cards in combination with a way to kill an ally yourself, and I think I was using Chant of Sacrifice for that, it gives you an infinite deck, right? If you have enough like battlefield control and enough units to wall up, and you can play all those cards. And that's why I wanted to use Rimia in the beginning, because I wanted Ancestral Army to put 3 bodies on the board for one action.
Yeah, well, Rowan gives you almost the exact same thing.
Right. Rowan is better at it. Maybe not better at it, because Rising Horde is a little bit more awkward, but you get 5 bodies out of 3 dice with it. And, where you made it shine is that Rowan actually has an end game, and where Rimia doesn't. I didn't really have a win con in that deck. I just built a deck that couldn't get milled. But Rowan can do the same thing and then eventually just chimera you to death. So yeah, I've played 1 or 2 games. It did pretty well, and that's a deck that I'd like to iterate on a little bit, because I think it's got potential if the meta is going to be longer paced.
Oh, and I mean, so yeah, was those decks. You mentioned it earlier too. You said Jessa as in terms of burn and sitting back, she's great at that, and I think that for sure we're going to see more Jessa, which should make a lot of people happy. And you know, if there's the burn route, there's obviously all the mill Phoenixborn that now can sort of have a place. So we tried Soraya. Leo, I've seen being played a ton, which is
Yeah.
really cool. I mean, just the fact that like, and obviously Noah, like Shadowblade has absolutely propelled him into the A tier of current Phoenixborn.
No doubt.
But it just seems like there's so many choices now, which is it's great.
Yeah, I mean, you even said before we got on the podcast, like Ninja Dance Mat's been playing Astria, and I've played against that deck. It's good. Like Astria can do some stuff in a meta where it's taller, and games take longer, and there's not as much like pressure on that 4 battlefield right away. And you're relying on a couple tall units, and Astria just eliminates one of them every round. I mean, it's legit. Like, and again, it all kind of stems back, I think, more to the Errata than anything else that brought down the top point of that power curve and is making everything else more relevant. And I agree with you. It's just it's exciting that there's a lot of. It feels like there's more viability for things out there right now. There's just more options. You can win more easily with more things.
Yeah. And can you believe it's only going to be like 2 months before we get the next set, and then it's going to all change again?
All those natural cards, and there's going to be a million frog pings everywhere.
Maybe. I mean, it'll naturally lead itself to frog pings, but I'm just really interested in the overall theme, which is like alterations.
Yeah.
Being more potent, because that's something that hasn't traditionally, like you might have a couple, like a one or two of in some decks.
Yeah, it'd be kind of interesting to see like, a 12 or 13 alteration deck,
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, I'm excited. Just like this is by far the best time to be in the game, to play the game, to be in the community. Everything just seems to be going well. And personally, I've said, I think I said this like at the start of the year, this was going to be year of the treatment. And I have like, what was it today? Today I felt completely on top of the world. I finished my pod. I went 3-0. I beat Matt Bowers with the Saria deck, and he was playing Cole, which is a monster in his hands.
Yeah.
And then last week I also got my 12th win in Phoenix League, which I was so happy to like share with you guys, because I was just like, finally, like, if I'm not going to make a top cut in a tournament, this was my way to win. And Underrug got it at the exact same time, and Carl as well. So like all three of us hit that mark, which was like awesome.
Yeah, that's sweet.
And now I'm just like enjoying, like sort of like the stress has just gone away from like having to focus so hard on things, that I'm just enjoying all the different varieties, and I want to get back into more deck building, or trying more like cooperative deck building, like whether it's the three of us or Shadow or whoever. I'm also copying a lot more decks these days, because there are so many unique ideas out there that I want to take them, give them a spin, put my own twist on it, that type of thing. So it's awesome.
Yeah, it is, and I'm glad you got the 12 wins that quickly in Phoenix League. That's sweet, because it does kind of take take a little bit of pressure off of your chest and let you do other stuff. I got really into my ELO for a while, because I went through a point where I won like 9 or 10 competitive games in a row, and like I was watching my ranking go up, and I was all excited about that. And then, but I also, I wanted to make sure I got into the collection of ashes at the end, like I wanted my invitation. And then German came out and said, hey, everyone that makes the top 4 in this pod thing is in Collection of Ashes. And once I heard that, I kind of chilled out a little bit, and I haven't won a Phoenix League game since then. So I probably should get back to trying a little harder.
To be fair, you've been under like a huge amount of work stress. So
yeah, but
there's only so much room in the brain for stress and for trying to give your 100%.
Yeah, that's true. But Ashes is kind of, when I'm at work so much and I'm not at home with my wife and kids, and Ashes, I can take my iPad to work and take a 20-minute break to clear my head and play a game. It was kind of my release and my my escape from that, because I would just sit at my desk and I'd get to a point where it's okay, I'm burned out. I need 15 minutes to just regenerate, and I would jump online and watch 15 minutes of an Ashteki game or play a quick one. And so I didn't have too hard of a time focusing my head when I needed to on the game, because it was I wanted to focus on it, right? It was my escape from the world of work. But
sure.
But yeah,
no,
there is only so much room for it. But it's you're right that I had a goal in mind. It's I want to make Collection of Ashes. I did that, and then my head just automatically reverts to okay, where's all the jank decks at? That's what I want to do. So eventually I'll win another Phoenix League game one day. But your comment about copying decks is interesting too, because I build so many decks that I usually never copy somebody else's. I just play something I built. This AshCon is the first time really that I can remember where I played a deck that was somebody else's. And it was refreshing, right? You built a really cool deck, and it's not something I would have put together. So it opens up new lines and new ideas as an Ashes player when you get a deck in your hands that isn't your style.
For sure.
And that forces you to, think outside, not the box, but think outside of your box, right? To play things that you don't normally play, but might be good, and in this case are very good.
Well, you get stuck, right, on certain cards, especially if you build a lot. It's sometimes it's oh, okay, here's the new idea of these 4 or 5 cards, and then it's what do I do with the other, 10 plus cards? And you're well, I'm just gonna grab sort of the same ones over and over again that you're used to. And it's nice, and this is why I had so much fun when I did the Campfire series with Shadow, is it was just okay, sometimes he would bring me an idea, sometimes I would bring him an idea, sometimes we just sit up late at night, and okay, how about this Phoenix Born? What can we do with it? And the ability to just, even sometimes a couple card changes, you're man, this deck almost feels good, but I just don't know what's wrong. And then you put it out there and someone's hey, let's change these few things. It becomes it's so much better. And you're oh yeah, you know what? I thought I needed this card and I didn't, or oh, I didn't realize this was a problem. And so that's what I'm now I don't know, everyone goes through phases of Ashes. I think that's where I am right now, is I want to take more of your decks or Schmendrick's decks or whoever's, Carl's decks, right? And try them, and then just start making small changes, maybe the way I see things, and see what comes out of the wash. Right. And I think, the 3 of us, we could probably come up with maybe another really cool deck for the next tournament.
I think so. And, using that groupthink mentality to bounce ideas off of each other has been cool and interesting. And, I want to keep working on this deck a little bit, right? I think it's well positioned in the meta, and if we keep iterating on it and finding the weak points, we talked about adding Generosity or Gates, right? To figure out the Noah matchup. maybe we run into some other matchup that hurts, and how do we fix that one while still keeping the integrity of the deck together? Yeah, those are things that, like you said, happen in other games, and is how the big decks are found and honed and tightened up. That, Ashes, and maybe there is a group of, I don't know if Carl and Brian and guys up there are doing stuff like that behind the scenes, but maybe there's a little bit of that. But
probably it's the only way we can explain that they're always the,
right,
the top 2 or 3 people. They have to have some cabal building decks and trying them all out behind the scees. A whole other server.
Yeah, just a whole other Discord for those guys to continually kill the rest of us. But yeah, I think it's something that's really cool, and that I want to keep doing.
Well, there you go. So there you have it. We covered the meta. We've obviously through our shared deck experience, we've solved the meta, and now we just need to solve the next meta, whatever that turns out to be.
That should be our tagline for this when we post this on YouTube. Ashes meta solved.
Every time.
You always see all these theory videos on YouTube. I'm big into watching theory stuff, and it's always I solved this. The big clickbait title. That's what we need to do. I solved the Ashes meta.
We've done it, right? We solved Brennan way back. We solved Hope, and we just keep solving problems here.
Right,
so,
that's what we do.
There you go.
That's what we do.
All right, I think this is a good point to wrap up. Gone an hour and a half deep, and I don't know when we're gonna record next, but I'm excited for whatever happens in the duration. Definitely a few more tournaments. And do you want to sign us off?
I can do that. If you're not janky, you're stanky.
Keep it cool, everyone.
Take it easy, guys. We'll see you.